Welcome everyone to my October 10th, 2023 webinar on Partnership for Well-Being. Last month, the topic was confronting your mortality and immortality. And I felt that topic brought a certain completeness to the long series of webinars that I've been doing. They've been going on for a long time. And I went back through my list and saw that exactly 8 years ago, I gave a webinar on the same topic, Partnership for Well-Being, in which I talked about what it is that goes on in my practice and what's special about it and why we call it partnership and why we refer to well-being. And I must say, it was kind of fun to go back and listen to myself from 8 years ago. I was pleased, actually, with the way I presented the webinar. And unfortunately, that I only have an audio recording of that webinar. No video was made. And so I thought, well, it'd be a really good idea to go ahead and do a video webinar and to have a chance to review how my practice has evolved over the probably 9 or 10 years that I've been doing it. And I have a lot of webinars recorded on YouTube. You can look it up either under David Sands or Partnership for Well-Being. I'll when I send out the email, announcing the next webinar, I'll try to include the link to my webinar series. I think that actually appears on my emails, but it's because it's repeated month to month. I actually don't remember. I think it's there on my YouTube channel. But I want to go back and talk again about what it is to work in a partnership and what's special about my practice, what well-being is all about, and how we help to create well-being by working in a partnership. Back when I started this practice, I got into it, I think I tell you in the ebook, some of you have read that, but maybe not recently. I got into this after years of medical practice. I retired and I was able to engage in a long meditation program here in Fairfield, Iowa. And it was really a wonderful experience. And one day a friend of mine told me they had a repetitive stress injury. And so their forearm was in pain. The muscles here in the forearm were in pain. And I was actually meditating, and thought came to me in meditation, which of course I would be inclined to ignore, but it was a very interesting thought. And the thought was, I can fix that. And I hadn't any idea how to do that. So I got together with a friend of mine, and I just kind of ran my hand over their arm. I'll see if I can get this up where you can see it there. And it kind of just went like this up and down the arm. And I could feel the energy in their arm, and they could feel my presence there. They could feel my hand passing over the arm without actually touching the arm. And I thought, well, that's interesting, and I need to learn more about this. By the way, their arm did get better. Within a few days, it was fine. And so I started reading up. I looked into pranic healing first, read a couple of books, kind of practiced that for a while. But I decided for various reasons that I won't go into now, that really wasn't the way I wanted to go about doing energy healing. But although it was a good foundation, it taught me a lot of things. And so I went about looking at different people's teaching about energy healing. And I came across matrix energetics, and I looked into that, and I thought, oh, yeah, this really looks interesting. And I took many courses. In fact, I took most of them twice. I'm a slow learner. Um, Unlike a lot of healers that maybe got a, particularly at a time of real crisis in their life, particularly a health crisis, um, they got a download, as they call it, from the intelligence of the universe that gave them some particular modality that they could utilize, often with many different techniques and such. Um, I didn't get that. I acquired my abilities through meditation and then training, and I had a lot of training and a lot of practice. Then I worked on a lot of people and began gradually to get a real handle on what energy healing was about. And I learned some other modalities too. I was very blessed to have a dear friend who introduced me to a number of other modalities that proved to be very useful. They had certain practical value about them, but I found that given my style of energy healing, that they really were energy techniques as well as behavioral cognitive kinds of approaches. And so I was able to utilize them in my practice. And I use them to this day, just depending on the particular circumstances of the client I'm working with. So oftentimes I'm working in silence, and then many times there's a conversation going on as I lead them through an exercise. I'll give you some examples of that in just a few minutes. But what I found is that I was a catalyst. I wasn't doing the healing myself. The healing was brought about by the intelligence of nature. And I was just a catalyst to facilitate that healing. And that the main element of that was my very subtle attention on that. So where was that attention? Well, I had learned from years and years of meditation and teaching about what meditation produces, consciousness, that ultimately one opens oneself to the very core of one's existence, the state of being. And when I write that, I always write that in capital letters, BEING in capital letters, to illustrate that it's really all about knowing ourself, and that is our being. And discovering that for myself and in my practice, and then my clients discovering that too, was able to bring about tremendous transformations, psychological transformations, physical transformations, emotional transformations, and spiritual transformations. And many times, all four of those things unfolded simultaneously just by being with me, working in a partnership with me, and working from that level of being, that level of pure consciousness, the level of the absolute self, the silent witness of all experience. And it unfolded very naturally, very spontaneously, with training to help me use it. But the unfolding of that all came from diving within myself. And when I work, much of the time, I just transcend. And in that transcendent state, with my attention on someone, the physiology, psychology, the emotional states, the cognitive states, the spiritual states, all transform simultaneously. And that's really been the fulfillment of my work as a healer that started when I actually, before I even entered the practice of medicine. One of the things that got me to go to medical school was that not having a useful advanced degree. I had a degree in physiology, which frankly is not a useful degree. That was certainly not for helping individual people. That I was working counseling hardcore heroin addicts in an outpatient methadone program in inner city Philadelphia, at what was at that time called Philadelphia General Hospital. And that was pretty frustrating work, frankly. I'm not sure I actually really helped anybody, but I certainly tried. I certainly tried to help people. But it showed me that I actually needed a degree in medicine in order to really be useful to people. So I eventually left that, and well, I applied to medical school and got in, and left counseling heroin addicts, and went to medical school, and then on into training in pediatrics. And I was, for my medical practice, I was a pediatrician. Um, and as a pediatrician, I used the tools of modern medicine, and found that if, well applied, people generally got better. One of the reasons I chose pediatrics is because, in fact, kids generally do get well, whereas adults often don't get well, and you wind up dealing with chronic abuse of the body and the destructive effects of that. And so I really enjoyed pediatrics, and I saved a lot of lives. I had a large practice with particularly young children and young mothers, and helped them a great deal to be parents, be effective parents, and to take good care of their kids. And I really liked what I did. It was very, very satisfying. But I also felt that there were limitations to that practice of medicine. There were things I simply didn't know about why most people got well, but why some people didn't. And as a physician, particularly when I was in medical school, I saw people get well that really never should have, from what we could tell. And I saw people die who never should have. There was no clear reason, from a medical point of view. So I knew that the knowledge that I had, which was wonderful knowledge, but it wasn't complete. It wasn't enough. Um, and so when I eventually got into energy healing, and I started, doing things, and was quite successful in helping people that way, I really felt fulfillment of that. And I must say that over the years that I've been doing it, that fulfillment has only grown, as I've grown increasingly comfortable and skillful at using the tools that I have and the consciousness that I have, the being, to help people to get well. Let me give you a few examples, if I may, of the use of consciousness and the way I go about practicing, so that I'm just doing a little bookkeeping here, so that you get a real sense of how I work. The first example I gave was just, running my hand over somebody's body, the direct application of a pure energy field, mine at that state of transcendence, interacting with somebody else's energy field, is a very effective way of producing change. There are a whole bunch of techniques that I've learned. One of the most basic ones that I got from Matrix Energetics is known as the 2-point technique, where my attention will just go to some part of somebody else's body. And that doesn't mean that there's something in their body at that point. It's just the energy. My attention goes there. And then I just ask, is there another place where my attention would go? And usually that will show up. And then the simple technique is to have awareness on both spots and transcend, and just dive into that field of being, that field of nature's intelligence. And that brings about transformation of the person's physiology through the changes in their energy field. Simple as can be. And in a sense, almost anybody can do that if you know how to transcend. If you know how to shift your awareness from that gross material level to the subtle level of energy, and then just to the level of pure being, where it's just still. That's why I paused. That state of being is just still. And watch the transformations take place. And then just, see the energy shift. When I say transformation, see the energy shift, and then people report later that they feel better, their pain is gone, they have more flexibility, or their wound or fracture or whatever it is heals up. Over the years, I've had quite a bit of experience with fractures. I find that they respond very well if I get them in the acute state, in the first few days of their occurrence. And can speed that recovery. I discovered that on myself. Thank you. I remember, and it was, I mentioned this on the webinar that I gave 8 years ago on this topic. I had a broken finger, and somebody else in the audience had broken something or other. I can't remember what it was. And I had healed my finger in about 5 days. And healing, and that the way it was demonstrated was that I could take the splint off. My finger was fine. I could use my finger, and it didn't hurt anymore. So I felt free to use it. I didn't, do any heavy lifting with my pinky finger. Anyway, it was kind of an unimportant finger. But I was able to utilize those healing modalities to heal the finger up in just 5 days. I just recently worked on somebody's foot. They had a fracture. It was a non-displaced fracture in some sense, not a big deal, but it sure hurt. There was a lot of swelling and, of course, blood. The bruising look. It's called ecchymosis. The black and blue that you see, and they had need of use of their foot, of course, but they were taking a trip, and there's going to be a lot of walking. And I just yesterday found out that they are doing very well. They took their trip and they've been able to walk around without any problem whatsoever. So it was great. Those simple kinds of things they're nice concrete examples of what energy work can do. They're very gratifying for me, and of course for the people that that work with me who's have a fracture, find their broken bone healed very quickly. I've worked, with things like colds and flus and other illnesses. But one of the most dramatic cases I ever had was way back at the beginning, when I first started practicing. And frankly, I only vaguely knew what I was doing. I had some idea, but I didn't have the depth of experience and knowledge that I have today. But somebody had autoimmune hepatitis, a young woman. And she came to me. She'd been using Western approaches, immunosuppressive drugs and some other things. And she was on the liver transplant list. I say that just so you understand how severe her disease was. Basically, when she was diagnosed, her liver was all but gone. There was hardly anything left of it. Her body had attacked her liver. And so I did a lot of energy work on her for, I think, more than a year. Today it wouldn't take that long, but I did the thing, and along the way, she was seeing her doctor regularly, and along the way, her laboratory values got better, and her liver regrew. Livers are good at that, actually, given the chance. And basically, and we have to give some credit to the immunosuppressive drugs, but the truth is that the liver doctors never see a liver regrow from autoimmune hepatitis. Her liver regrew. She eventually was taken off the liver transplant list, kind of late, I thought, because she was clearly getting better and didn't eat a liver. And she was able to resume her life, which she had to basically put on hold. So, needless to say, she was very happy. And, I was pleased, obviously, to have been able to have been of help. But I took from that the encouragement to really pursue this and to do more study. That's actually, I think I learned that right as I was beginning to learn matrix energetics. I was working with her at that time. And so I continued my studies and gradually, began to feel like I really could do some stuff. I had a wonderful experience one time on one of those matrix energetics training courses. I was talking with the matrix energetics was created by Richard Bartlett and a friend of his, but his professional teaching, he taught with a woman named Melissa Joy. And was talking with Melissa one day, and I kind of let it be known to her that I had a little bit of doubt about what I was doing. Didn't feel like things were happening fast enough. And I am kind of an impatient person. I like work that really produces results quickly. I've had friends, who do various kinds of medicine and rehabilitation and stuff. And, they spend weeks, months, and even years. They're not getting quick results. And I was impatient. I wanted to see changes. I wanted people to get better. I didn't want to work with people forever. I wanted it to happen quickly. So I was talking with this teaching assistant. Um, she's really great, by the way, and fine energy healer. Very, very insightful. And we finished our conversation, sort of. I had expressed my doubt, and she started to walk away, and she turned around again, just a few feet away from me, and she turned around again, and she said, your experience is the same as ours, by which she meant hers and the teacher, Richard Bartlett. And I said, thank you. And I wasn't quite sure, but I've since come to realize that she was being completely sincere. She knew what my experience was from what I had told her about was happening when I did my work. And that was tremendously reassuring as I realized that, what she said was really true. And the same with distance healing. It was quite a revelation for me when I realized I could heal people who weren't in the room with me. And then I eventually realized that if I don't lay my hands on somebody, I'm working at a distance. I'm interacting with their field. Well, fields are everywhere. They're not limited by space and time. I can work with anybody anywhere in the world, and I do. And I appreciate that. I have clients far and wide. And lately, I've been working with a bunch of people out on the West Coast. And Zoom is very helpful that way because I get to actually see them, and I see how they're reacting to what I'm doing with them as we work together to produce effects. But I have people all over the world, and distance healing came to me in that same kind of, I'm not sure if I can really do this at a distance, and then I realized it's the same thing. I feel the same things, and it's very easy to tune into people. One of the things I learned along the way was that I can tune into somebody at the mere mention of them. And I remember this wonderful example where a local healer and I were having a conversation, and they said, I have a relative, a young relative, a child, like a niece or a nephew or something. And they suddenly stopped talking. They were like 6 or 7, and they suddenly stopped talking. And that's all it took for me to tune in to their energy. And right away, I knew. I said to them, "Oh," I said, "don't worry. They're fine. They'll start talking again in a little while. Just don't make a thing of it. Tell the family, the parents, don't make a thing of it. Just go on. It'll be fine." And it was. I found out later. Yeah, they got better within a week or so. It was just a thing kids go through. There was no trauma. Not really. There was probably some disappointment or some surprise, some sort of a little shock, but no big thing. Typically you'd think, oh my God, the kid's probably, been threatened or, abused or something. And there was nothing really. The kid just got better. The kid was fine. And so that kind of just tuning into somebody often happens. People say, oh, I have this relative, or they'll just say, very casually, it's like, oh, I've had this problem, with some pain somewhere. And I'll just, I just tune into them. It's like, okay, yeah, I can help you with that. Need to meet formally and work on that, but it's going to get better. Pain will go away. Acute conditions are a lot easier to handle than chronic ones. I've had experiences with people, like if I see somebody who's had a stroke years before, I've never been able to produce much of an effect. But people who've just had a stroke and I see them, or at least connect with them within like a week or less, they often get better. I had one patient who had actually encephalitis, and they were very, very severely affected, and their vocabulary, or not their vocabulary, but their ability to put words together, when I first started working with them was limited to 2 words at a time. They could say 2 words. And within just a very short period of time, um, they they were able to speak sentences, and they continued to get better. It took a little while. The sentences got longer. They were a little short at first. The sentences got longer, and then we reached a point at which there was one thing left that was kind of peculiar, and had to do with their use of vocabulary. They had a limitation in specific use of vocabulary. And so you'd wind up playing like a charades game with them to try to guess what they were trying to tell you. And if you could say it, then they'd go, "Oh yeah, you got it." But sometimes, you play this little game and you say, "Was it this?" And no. Was it that? No. And finally you'd get it, and they go like, "Yeah, that's it." But they couldn't remember the words. It's kind of like I am. I've never been good with people's names. I can see people out on the street, and I can't think of their name on the spot, even though I know them. And that's not gotten better as I've gotten older. So I play a game with myself when I see anybody anywhere. Just in my head, I just go like, "Oh, that's so and so." I use their name and see if I can remember it. Sometimes, like, I can't remember the names of actors and actresses, and then it'll come to me, in a moment where I'm more relaxed. So anyway, this person had that kind of a problem, and it did eventually get better, but it wasn't because of my work. But my work at the beginning was very effective. So acute conditions are much easier to treat. Chronic ones are slower to respond, and they may not respond completely. And I think part of that is because people have a certain habit. They develop a certain expectation that this is the way it is. And so even though you can produce some energy shifts, I find that the energy just snaps back to where it was. And I think that's because cognitively, they believe that this is how it is. If they've got a bad hip, they got a bad hip. And it's, so to speak, hard to talk them out of it, except we don't talk. We don't do it verbally. It's just try to shift the energy. And I can oftentimes get the energy to shift, but then I find it flips back again fairly quickly. But I've seen some very profound healing take place when people began to believe or came to believe that they were actually changing. They were getting more well-being, and whatever part that wasn't working or parts started to work better and better. And so they believed that change was possible. So I think the attitude of that, or that belief thing that's inside of people, is a big factor. The other big factor that I've come to see a lot over the course of my practice and really begin to understand and work with is that almost everybody has some part inside them that doesn't want to heal, that doesn't want to change. And sometimes that takes some real searching. People will sometimes say, they'll just say it out loud. But a lot of times it's just really subtle, and it's like, why don't they heal? Why don't they heal? What is it that's going on inside at perhaps some deep level? Maybe it's a past life influence, or something in a parallel universe occasionally, or familial pattern. And so if I can find that, and I can do this on the silent level, I don't have to do it in a conversation with somebody. If I can find that on that silent level, I can get that energy to shift. And then if I can clear that blockage, the energy of that belief that they are not going to change, and allow for the possibility of change and further development, then in fact, it happens. And it's a very beautiful thing to see. I occasionally run into people where it doesn't happen right away, shall we say, that it takes multiple sessions. It takes multiple sessions for us to get to that point where, even on that subtle level, I can reach that block. I can find that thing that's going on in them, and sometimes find out why it's there. Sometimes, I can find it in a past life or in this life, or some trauma or something. Um, and then, I don't usually tell people what that was, what that I found, because then it becomes part of their story. And I think I've done a whole lecture way back when on stepping out of our stories. And if there's something I've learned over the years of my practice, it's that people really can get caught up in their stories. And, I'll say, what's going on with you? And, I get a download, 15, 20, 30 minutes of their story. And, you know, uh, what I'm listening for is what I will call the hook into their energy, the thing and that most people don't hear themselves say it, but I pick it up, I hear it. And I may even interrupt and say, you just said something, and I'll repeat it. How about if we start working on that? And we'll go in and may work on the silent level, may work, there may be some talking, some discussion back and forth. But we'll explore that and the energy around that, and clear that energy out, and then transformation starts to happen. And then often, I'm doing both things. I'm working on the specifics, and I'm working on just I'd say the most basic level of energy. The body has energy systems within it, ways that the energy is organized. People call them chakras, and I can't remember the word from acupuncture. Meridians. And so I can, get in there and work with those things, clear things out, and get the energy flowing. And I've been given tools for, like measuring the general energy of somebody. And so it's nice sometimes I can say, well, your energy is actually much better than you think. Or sometimes they'll say, I usually say it, kind of softly, like, your energy is kind of low, maybe half of what it's supposed to be, but I'm not going to tell them that. Because again, I don't want that to be part of their story. I say, your energy is kind of low, but I'm going to do some work, increase your energy. And people usually can feel that. And that may, they make it a bump and feel better. And then next time we meet, it slid back a ways, but usually not all the way, unless something has happened, which occasionally does. I've worked some with long COVID. Haven't had a lot of experience with that, interestingly. Maybe it's just the people I know are pretty good at putting themselves back together. I had a lack of energy and a requirement for a lot of sleep from having COVID. I think it was last December, and that lasted for months. But I realized that what was really going on was that I was approaching my 80th birthday with trepidation. It's like, okay, am I going to, be able to carry on another decade or two? I expect to last another couple of decades. And a whole bunch of things kind of combined to make that question kind of deep inside me. And I needed some resolution to that. And then the nicest thing happened. My daughters took me on a long weekend with the granddaughters and one of the husbands. And I got to just be with my family for a while and, talk about what was going to happen in the next decade. And, actually have the talk that us old folks have with family, or at least should have with family about, what is it we want to see at the end, and but there was nothing going on that was, bringing me to the end. And after that lovely long weekend, I thought, boy, this is going to be a really good decade. I'm really looking forward to this, and excited about what new abilities I may develop in the healing realm, and being with my grandkids and my kids, and all of that sort of stuff. And so my my trepidations about crossing that threshold at 80 years passed, and now I'm feeling very positive about it and having a really good time. And I'm doing a lot of work, which is always very helpful, as well as taking care of my granddaughter after preschool in the afternoons, and doing long meditation programs. So my life is very good right now. So when I look over my program and I looked at my website, and some of the things I wrote about my healing work and about myself, And I was surprised, in many ways, that really tells the story. In some sense, nothing has changed. But in another sense, it's all grown enormously. And it's been very gratifying, very fulfilling to me to see the changes that have taken place and are continuing to take place, and really make me very optimistic about and excited really about what's going to happen in the next decade or two as I continue on with this work. So I'm just going to check the chat to see if there's any comments. So I got a question. It's a very good question. Do you ever help people anonymously and without their asking when you're just sensing they need it? The answer fundamentally is no. I always try to get people's permission. I think it's been a very rare occurrence where a family member has given me permission when somebody wasn't able to make a judgment. And so, I've had a little, I just don't work on people without their permission. It's a, it's like when somebody violates your personal space, either stepping into it or they just say things, or ask you questions, whatever. It's an uncomfortable thing. And so, particularly people who are sensitive, they get this like somebody's messing with me, and they may not appreciate that it's for their well-being. So no, I don't work on people without their permission. Another question: can psychology, the practice of psychology, they mean, create too much story? I think that's generally true. That is, I think it often happens, maybe way more than half the time. I've had some experience with psychoanalysts and more experience with psychotherapists, but particularly psychoanalysts. People when they do psychoanalysis usually do it for years, many years, 5 years, even 10 years or more. And they can get very dependent on their analyst. I remember one person that I literally had to tell I would not work with while they were seeing their therapist because they were completely dependent on their therapist, for their quote sense of well-being. And I knew that working with me would not be productive. They would sabotage it every time because I saw that when we did a few sessions. I realized that. And so I basically said, you've got a psychotherapist, you like your psychotherapist, you work with them, but I'm not going to be able to really help you. I'm not going to, I didn't say because you don't really want to change. You like being dependent on somebody. And you'd think that their therapist would have identified that because they've been with the therapist for more than a decade. You'd think that the therapist would have said to them, we're going to set a deadline for your independence. And, you've got to get yourself together and be able to take responsibility for yourself and be a grown-up. Never happened. Anyway, don't see them anymore. Sorry about that. Do you take into consideration astrological situations or can you work through them? The first phrase there, take into consideration astrological considerations. I work with a number of people on and off who are really into astrology. And I usually get the complaint, Venus is retrograde or something to that effect. And I'm a mess. And it makes it very hard to produce any change because they're rooted in the understanding that the planets are beating them up. It may not be that literal, but there's this belief system, and so they believe they're not going to change because the planets, they're in a bad planetary time, which is most of the time, or much of it anyway. They're more malevolent planets than benevolent ones, to put it a different way. So somebody's beating up on you almost all the time. So I don't take the astrology into consideration. I do tell people that I can work with them. And I've done some work directly with planetary influence, meaning whatever that energy is that's coming in from karma, to change that in that sense. But usually, excuse me, I'm gonna take a drink. Usually, um, the way of dealing with karma is to deal with the energy that is coming in from wherever it is coming in, the past lives or family history or the current life history or whatever, and thus help people deal with their karma and appreciate that they have a lesson to learn. And I'm working with 2 or 3 people right now who's have had horrendous histories of abuse and trauma and difficulty in life, and um, and who've dealt with it with remarkable success. And I'm just helping them finish it up to clear that karma. Now, you could say clear that planetary influence, yes, but don't blame it on the planets. The planets are markers or indicators of the kind of influence that you may be experiencing at a particular time when the karma is coming due. And that can be karma that is unpleasant, or it can be good karma, as we call it, karma that feels good. Can I help people improve their financial karma and attract abundance? If there is some energy that is coming in from wherever, past life or wherever, that is influencing one's ability to receive the abundance from nature, I can work with that. And you can call that financial karma if you wish. But I just think of it in energy terms. Certainly, there is something to the law of attraction. I find that a little bit simplistic, if I can say that. I hope I don't offend anybody who's really into it, into the law of attraction. But there's so many factors that influence, any area of life, relationships, finances, health, so on. There's so many factors. And the beauty of working with the energy work is that you just work with what's ever there. And so if there is an attitude of rejection or a blockage to acceptance of abundance, which gives one often the feeling of, I don't deserve it, I'm not good enough, and so on, things like that. Yeah, we can work with that. And sometimes we work with that on the cognitive level as well as the energy level. Sometimes I just do it on the energy level. It depends on the person and, frankly, how ready they are to receive that transformation. Sometimes I do the energy work and then we have a little conversation about, changing our attitude. So yeah, it can be a combination of things like that. These are great questions. Thank you. I don't see any more, and we've gone on for quite a long time. So I'm going to end here. We will have a webinar next month. Oops, there's one in the question and answer. About sending love and peace energy. It says to Israel and the area. I'm going to emphasize the area. The Middle East has long been troubled, and not just in the last 50 or 60 years, but long been troubled over and over again. It's a crossroads of the world, and conflict has existed many, many times. What's going on is horrendously sad. And I think, and really tragic. And I think from my side, the thing to do is to ask everyone to be self-referral, to be in their state of being, which is bliss consciousness. I didn't use that word before, but it's bliss consciousness. And to bring that bliss to the people so that there may be some peace and some willingness to actually work out a reasonable, practical solution so that everybody feels good instead of the situation we have today, which is where everybody feels really bad. It's a great tragedy. And we have several of those tragedies in the world right now. And we need, we certainly on the practical level, we need some real leadership, some real statesmanship, some diplomats, people who can really help people who have bad feelings towards each other to find a way of working so that everybody can be happy and successful. And, the things that have been going on for decades now, pretty much leave everybody in fear and misery. Particularly the Palestinians, situation has been particularly miserable. And so I think we just need to transcend the whole horror, the whole conflict, and just bring that inner bliss to the world. And the more of us that do it and do it together, the better the chance it is of bringing some resolution to the matter, because the current situation doesn't have a happy outcome. You can't envision a happy outcome. We're not working towards a happy outcome. We're working towards destroying each other. And that's just not viable. So I hope that is satisfying on a very deep level. Certainly feel badly for the people in Israel and the people who've been taken hostage, but I feel badly for the Palestinians. Israel's bombing the heck out of them and possibly going to invade. So very difficult situation, very unhappy situation. So I hope that helps. I'm not seeing any other questions, so I'm going to wrap up this part of the program